One of the most controversial topics in football history has to be that of Pele. From creating a public holiday in Congo, to winning 3 World Cups despite never actually being the best player in any of them, to pausing a civil war in Nigeria, to being banned from ever leaving his country by the president, to, according to some people, literally forging up goals just to stay relevant. The controversies were just limitless. But then on to the man himself. No matter what side of the debate you are on, we can all agree. Pele was an absolute beast in his day. A physical specimen, standing at just 5'8". His vertical leap was at 48 inches, which was at the same level with a certain Michael Jordan. His ridiculous 0.9 goal ratio, while playing most of his career as an attacking midfielder, while also being the most creative person on the field, was just unparalleled. Not to talk of his ability with the ball at his feet. So today we are going to look at how good was Pele actually? Despite the fact that Pele's father, Dondinho, was a footballer and actually one of the best in Brazil according to Pele himself, Pele actually grew up not wanting to play football. He didn't believe he could make it as a professional footballer. He saw that despite all his father's talent, the family was still very poor. So poor that at a very tender age, Pele would go into town to work as a shoeshines boy in order to bring in some cash for the family. The family was so broke. His retired footballer father could not even afford to buy his son a real ball. Our man had to learn with either a sock stuffed with newspaper and tied with a string or a grapefruit. However, even in his amateur teams, Pele was sensational. His ability to make brilliant decisions, coupled with immense control and creativity at such a young age, was just difficult to grasp. By the time he was 15 years old, Santos had seen and heard so much about him. They couldn't risk losing him to other clubs. They had to give him a professional contract. After just 2 seasons in, I would like to say he was sensational. But let me put it this way. Before Pele, the all-time goal scorer in the Brazil's Paulista Championship, had 39 goals in the tournament. In Pele's second season, he had scored 57, making Santos champions for the 2nd time in their history. Fans were literally chanting and clamoring to have Pele called up for the 1958 World Cup. So, at 17 years of age, our man became the youngest player ever to feature in the tournament. But then, just a little over 2 years ago, Pele was still a shoeshines boy. Everything had happened so fast that a psychologist told the coach that Pele would not be able to cope in the tournament. But, despite not playing the first 2 matches, Pele would finish the World Cup with 6 goals, being the youngest player to feature in a World Cup, youngest player to score in a World Cup, first player to score a World Cup hat trick in the semifinals, youngest player to score in the final, and was the 2nd best player of the tournament. Remember, he was just 17 years old. By the time he returned home, his whole life had changed. He had become a national hero. Everybody was talking about him. Anything he said became national news. Pele was the first football superstar, first black sports legend. He became the literal image of Brazil. Any product with his name would sell out in minutes. Almost every wealthy European club such as Real Madrid, Juventus, and Manchester United tried to sign him in vain. In 1958, Inter Milan even managed to get him a regular contract, but their president was forced to tear the contract up at the request of Santos's chairman, following a revolt by Santos's Brazilian fans. You see, back then, Brazil's president was massively hated by Brazilians. Following some of his decisions, most of his followers had turned their back on him, so doing everything within his power to make sure that Pele, the people's hero, never left the country, was literally the only way of trying to get back on the good side of the people. He had to make a new law that literally banned Pele from ever leaving the country without his say-so. Pele had become a prisoner in his own country. However, the next year, Santos would begin touring the world with Pele as their poster boy. They beat Barcelona 5-1 and were so dominant against Inter Milan that their fans gave him a standing ovation. This is why Pele would always say he scored over 1,000 goals, because despite how astonishing these matches were, FIFA simply said they were not official. Remember how Messi scored 91 goals in that his most sensational year? Well, in Pele's most sensational year, he scored 110. In fact, Pele was so feared that when Olympiacos managed to beat them 2-1, a line was attended to the club's anthem that they had beat Santos and the mighty Pele. The next year, they would beat the Champions League winners, Benfica, winning the Intercontinental Cup 8-4, with our man scoring 5 himself. When the 1962 World Cup came around, Pele was the man. The entire country looked on him to carry Brazil to the trophy. But an injury in just the second match saw his tournament cut short. And even though Brazil won, Pele would watch from the stands. His failed marriage, coupled with the fact that his country was now being taken over by the military, and the unbelievable pressure and expectations from his countrymen. Pele was not the same. The expectations dragged him down so much, he decided the next World Cup would be his last. He was so fed up with the attention, he wanted one more tournament and he would retire. Despite his failing mental health, Santos would begin pulling away from most major tournaments like the Copa Libertadores so they could continue flaunting Pele in tours. So by the time the next World Cup came by, Pele was obviously exhausted. And just like the last one, by the second game, once again, Pele was injured. And though he returned in that same tournament, his next match was against Portugal. During the game, Portugal defender João Morais performed a horror tackle on Pele. The referee even refused to send him off, a decision that FIFA would in retrospect call one of the worst decisions made by a referee. And since back then, they were no substitutions. Pele had to stay on the field limping for the rest of the game, and at the end, Brazil lost. At this point, Pele couldn't take it anymore and decided to quit the national team and vowed never to play for Brazil again. But 4 years later, with the country's crisis reaching an all-time high, Brazil really wanted something to smile about, so despite the fact he had vowed never to play for the national team again. When the 1970 World Cup started, Pele stepped up, and he would put up one of the most incredible World Cup performances ever, making 10 direct goal contributions, a feat that has never been surpassed to this day. Pele had led Brazil to another World Cup, making him the only human to ever win 3 World Cups. After Santos, our man would move to New York. On his debut, there were 152 photographers following his every move. Just for comparison, when the US president at the time, Jimmy Carter, was inaugurated, not up to 150 cameramen showed up. Pele was truly the king. Thanks for watching.